Parvana's Journey, Chapter 13. Parvana kept her plan to herself for the first few days. She and Asif needed to rest and take care of Hassan, and she wanted Layla to get used to them before she started changing things. She did use an old board to scoop dirt over the animal carcasses. They'd have to be properly buried, but she didn't have the strength to do that just yet. The dirt might help keep the flies away, she explained to Layla, who had taken to following her everywhere. I never thought of that, Layla said. Nobody told me. She looked down at her feet. I try to do things right. Parvana bent down so she could look Layla in the eye. You do all kinds of things right. If you don't know, you don't know. No shame in that. Parvana brushed some hair out of the little girl's face so Layla could see her smile. She suddenly drew back and then forced herself to look again. Underneath the hair that fell over Layla's forehead was a large sore like the smaller ones on the lower part of her face, but this one had small white worms wiggling in it. Come with me, she said, and she led Layla to a sunny place in the yard. What are you up to? Asif asked. Parvana showed him the sore. Let me take care of that, he said. I've got more patience than you do. Parvana was about to argue, but she realized that he was right. He was more patient. She went to heat up some water to wash the wound. That was what her mother always did. Do you realize you've got worms crawling in your face? She heard Asif ask Layla. Sometimes I feel them and I try to brush them away, but I can't always feel them. Parvana fetched a bit of soap from the treasure house and built up the fire under a pot of water. She cut some strips of cloth and carried everything over to Layla and Asif. On her way, she checked on Hassan. He was napping in the little house, not far from grandmother. You'll need these, Parvana said to Asif and Layla, but they didn't even hear her. Layla was talking a mile a minute while Asif patiently pulled the tiny worms from her wound. It's the flies, he said. They lay eggs in the sore and the eggs grow into worms. How did you get to be so smart? Layla asked. Anyone knows that, Parvana was about to say, then bit back her words. Asif was actually smiling. I can take over, Parvana said. Why? We don't need you. Asif finished with the worms and gently dabbed at the wound with a cloth soaked in hot water. You need to keep your face clean, he said to Layla. In fact, you need to keep your whole self clean. I know that I should. Now that you're all here, I will. When it was just grandmother and me, I forgot. Parvana left them to it. She wasn't sure what she was feeling. Was she jealous? Of what? Mentally, she gave herself a kick. Here they were, finally safe, with food to eat and water to drink, and she was getting all moody. What was wrong with her? Whatever it was, she couldn't understand it yet. What she could understand was work. She changed into her old boy clothes so she wouldn't get the girl clothes dirty and got busy. Bit by bit, Green Valley took shape. The worst job was hauling the animal carcasses out of the clearing and burying them outside the canyon. Asif attached ropes to them. Parvana and Layla pulled them out, and all three children dug the holes. Then they dug a proper latrine and cleaned up the yard of everything that attracted flies. There was a lot less buzzing after that. How do you know how to do all this? Layla asked after every new thing they did. Parvana wasn't sure. My mother liked everything to be clean, and she always made me help her. I also saw how people did things in the camps and villages I traveled through with my father, and some things are just common sense. You? Common sense? Asif laughed. Parvana ignored him. She had come to the conclusion that Asif could be pleasant to everyone but her. We need to keep the mice out of the rice and flour, he said. He rummaged through the junk in the yard until he came up with enough boards and plastic sheeting to build some mouse-proof containers. He used rope to bind them together when he couldn't find enough nails. You girls clean out the rest of the rice and flour, he ordered, and I'll make plastic pouches for the food that's still good. Parvana noticed that Asif was always cheerful when he was giving orders. Parvana and Layla hauled the mouse-tunneled sacks up to the top of the lookout hill. We can watch for my mother while we clean the rice, Layla said. We can watch for your mother at the same time. Why not? Parvana replied, flicking a mouse turd down the hill. Maybe your mother and my mother will meet each other and they'll come walking across the field together. Wouldn't that be great? It would be great, but it's not likely to happen. But it could happen, Layla insisted. Don't you think so? Don't you think it could happen? All right, Parvana relented. It could happen. This set Layla off on a long, detailed fantasy about how their mothers would meet and mysteriously know their children were together and decide that it was time to come back to them. By the time she stopped to catch a breath, Parvana almost believed her. Asif's mother is dead, Layla said. So is his father, so is everyone else. How do you know that? He told me he was living with an uncle who beat him, so he ran away. Why did he tell you? He never told me, Parvana said, but Layla was already talking about something else. Parvana stopped listening. She was too busy being annoyed at Asif. As the days went by, Green Valley began to look better, and so did the children. Layla's sores started to heal, and one day Parvana washed and combed out the little girl's long hair. She didn't have a real comb and had to use her fingers, but Layla's hair looked much better when she was finished. Parvana tied it in 2 long braids and laughed as Layla swung her head from side to side, feeling the braids move. Hassan lost that floppy baby look. He's like a plant, Parvana said. If you don't water a plant, it wilts, but then when you start watering it again, it bounces back. He started crawling. You were much easier to look after when you stayed where we put you, Parvana told him. They had to watch him carefully as he put everything he found into his mouth, whether it was good for him or not. Hassan would allow himself to be fed by anybody, but he clearly preferred Asif. When he got bored with Asif, he crawled around looking for other fun things. He loved to watch the pigeons, and when the children couldn't find him, that's usually where he was. Hassan is standing up! Asif yelled one day. The others came running. Hassan had hauled himself up by holding on to the wires of the pigeon cage. He grinned and laughed as he reached for the pigeons, but when he let go of the cage, he fell back on his rump. He looked surprised, then reached out and hauled himself back up again. Then one morning, the children couldn't find Hassan. He wasn't at the pigeon cage or inside the house. Parvana got a cold feeling in her stomach. He can't be in the minefield. Well, don't just stand there. Run after him, Asif yelled. Layla was faster. Hassan had crawled through the little canyon and was right on the edge of the minefield. Layla snatched him up. You can't go there, she said as Hassan screeched. You're not protected yet. She handed him over to Parvana as he squirmed and fussed. The children discussed the problem. We can't let him crawl into the minefield, Parvana said, but we don't want to chase after him all day either. Asif came up with a solution. Tie a rope around his waist, then he can crawl around without going anywhere he shouldn't. They tried this, and it worked fine. As long as he had something to lean against, Asif found that he was very good at patching mud walls. He fashioned a device with long boards that let him reach the high spots. Soon the house looked stronger. Layla and Parvana dug up some wildflowers from the edge of the minefield and replanted them in the yard. Layla edged the little flower bed with rocks. Parvana remembered the flowers she had once planted in the marketplace in Kabul. She wondered whether they were blooming. None of the children knew anything about growing vegetables, but when Parvana pulled the weeds and dead plants out of the garden, she found some things growing there already. Maybe seeds fell from last year's vegetables, she said to Layla, who was helping her. Maybe it's magic, Layla said. I told you the ground likes me. Layla started burying bits of Hassan's food along with hers at the start of each meal. After some prodding, Parvana began to do the same thing. She felt foolish at first, but then it became a habit. Asif refused. There's no protection against landmines, he insisted. You two are idiots. Is that how you lost your leg? Parvana asked. She had never dared ask him before, but if he was willing to tell Layla about his family, maybe he was prepared to talk about his leg too. She was wrong. No, it wasn't a landmine, he said, glaring at her. It was a wolf who ate my leg, but I ate the wolf, so I won the battle. You're very brave, Layla said. Asif smiled at her and stuck his thin chest out a little. Parvana just rolled her eyes. Every afternoon, Parvana went to a shady spot in the yard and wrote to her friend. Dear Shazia, we patched up the pigeon cage this morning and cleaned it out. I wish we had some vegetable seeds. With all the fertilizer from the pigeons, we could have a wonderful vegetable patch. Some chickens would be nice too. Pigeons are good to eat, but I prefer chicken. Maybe another peddler will get caught in the landmine. A peddler with chickens and seeds and lanterns and lantern oil and toys for Hassan, books for me, a false leg for Asif, real jewelry for Layla, and some new toe shacks, fluffy ones without bugs in them. Until then, we'll have to make do with what we have. Parvana read back over what she'd written, thinking how lovely it would be to have all those things. Then she realized that for her wishes to come true, some peddler would have to die. For a moment she wondered what she was becoming. Then she dismissed the question. I didn't create this world, she said to herself. I only have to live in it.